Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Adoption Q&A session for hopeful adoptive parents. This is Kim King and Libby Denniston here at Lifetime Adoption, and we're happy to have you with us as we answer the questions that are on your minds. If you are very new to Lifetime, you may not know that we have a free application on our website at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. It is free to apply, and there is no need to worry about any obligation. It is just helping us kind of just start to learn who you are, a little bit about what you're looking for in your adoption. It just opens the conversation. You can always let us know, hey, yes, I filled out that application. I'm just not really sure about what I'm doing just yet, or I just have questions. Whatever it may be, we are here to help you. Hopefully tonight we'll be able to answer lots of questions for you. If there are questions more specific to your circumstances, more personal questions related to your adoption journey, that maybe you need to share some information with us so that we can give you our best insight as to what we would recommend or how we would answer your question, feel free to call us directly so that you can have a one-on-one conversation with us. The number is 1-800-923-6784, and our general hours are Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 Pacific time. You can also email questions as they spring to mind. The email is adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. Use that email, adopt@lifetimeadoption.com, or the phone number 1-800-923-6784. If you don't have a coordinator yet and you're not sure who can help you, just reach out and we'll point you in the right direction and provide someone who can assist you. You can also on Facebook and be a part of the conversation and observe the different topics that we have on our Facebook page. There's lots of support and advice on our Facebook page. It's a very positive environment. The Facebook link is facebook.com/open.adoption. And Libby, thank you for setting up our webinar this evening.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited. We've had a lot of webinars to celebrate Adoption Month, and we're looking forward to a few more great topics before the end of the year. And so some of you may have already seen those variety of topics coming that you can sign up for. Sign-ups are open. You may have seen them in your email. You may have been on adoptionteleconference.com, or maybe you saw some of them posted on Facebook. And it's so great to see people anticipating the webinars that we have because really all of you make these webinars a great resource. It's your questions that inspire us to host different topics. It's your questions that light up these adoption Q&As. And I mean, a little backstory, Kim and I, we used to work hard every month to come up with creative new topics, and no matter what we're presenting, people always have questions that are not related to what we're talking about. And so we figured, let's just open up a Q&A and make it easy for us to talk about anything. And so they've become one of our greatest resources for people, not only who are researching adoption or starting to research adoption professionals like Lifetime or Lifetime Services, but also we have private adoption Q&As for Lifetime families who are in the process and currently waiting. And so it's always really neat to see where the different phases of adoption spark different questions, different needs, and then we may decide to focus a whole webinar on one of those questions. But I would say that, Kim, you and I talk about this a lot. These are some of our favorite webinars to host because it really is up to you. Even Kim said before we began tonight, she said, isn't it funny that we just show up to a webinar, we don't know what we're going to talk about? And I said, yeah, it's great, because we really do talk a lot about some of the same things, but that's because they're really important topics. And we know that I would say even people who are already actively in the adoption process often need to hear things again and again because there is a lot of information to absorb when it comes to adopting, and you want to make sure you're doing it safely and as smoothly as possible, and that's really, I think it's great because you're all encouraging each other, you're all helping each other too. So we had a great question. We don't often get to dive into this, and I think we might as well start here tonight. It was our very first question. What are the best things to talk about with a birth mother when you first visit? Now, Kim, maybe we could put this into two categories, because on one hand I read this at first and I thought the first phone call, or when you see each other for the very first time, which could be before the adoption happens. But then this could also mean, what kind of things should we talk about the first time we get together or communicate after the adoption? So we could sort of talk a little bit about both sides of that. But let's talk a little bit first about when you find out there's a birth mother who wants to speak with you. Now,
Yes.
maybe you could give a little bit of backstory on how we get to that phone call to begin with, just because I know that there are some other questions I see popping up talking about, how much will we know about her before we say yes to the match? And, how do we know we'd be open to her if she calls us? And will we know that she's going to call, or will it be a cold call, sort of surprise sort of thing? So why don't we talk a little bit about the few steps that are leading up to finding out about a birth mother who wants to talk?
Okay. So in the beginning of your exploration with Lifetime, we will have a phone conference, and we will talk with you and help you understand how to set up the preferences for your adoption. Preferences, what they look like is a list of different characteristics on paper or on a computer screen where you have either a yes or a no, and you might have some notes that elaborate on some things. So you might have a yes for newborn, a yes for newborn up to 3 months. You might have a yes to any race. You might have a yes to alcohol during pregnancy as long as the baby is healthy and no fetal alcohol syndrome. So these are your preferences that we will discuss. There are other preferences I didn't mention. Those are just some examples. So we will discuss those with you and really put yes on things that you know you are 100% on board with. That, when a birth mom within these characteristics chooses you, you'll be excited to be chosen by her because she fits within everything you've already decided is totally fine with you. So once we've got those preferences set up, then when you begin your program, we can actually send your profile out to those birth moms that do meet what you're looking for, and you also meet what she's looking for. And we're going to work one-on-one with each and every birth mom who is in our program. You may not know about her just yet. You probably won't know. There are going to be lots of birth moms viewing your profiles. You're only going to learn about the one who meets her requirements and then expresses interest in you specifically. So she's got to send back some paperwork. She's got to provide the information we need. We typically like to see about 16 to 20 weeks into the pregnancy before she's going to take that next step and make herself known to you. But in the meantime, she's been reading your profile, she's been working on her paperwork, she's been getting, her medical release over to us, she's been keeping in touch with us. Now this is the typical adoption scenario described where, she is matching in advance. We have some adoptions that happen at the last second too, and those are just as great opportunities. But when you're matching while she's currently pregnant, at that point, when she's met all her requirements and has asked for you specifically, that's when we call you and let you know every detail we've learned about her. So we have full disclosure with you. You will know everything we know. And the great thing is you'll know everything we know because we're the ones who know that birth mom. We're working one-on-one with her, and we're the ones telling you all about her. We're reading through the paperwork she's provided. We're sharing about the conversations we've had. We're letting you know everything that we've discovered about the birth mom and everything she's shown or shared with us. At that point, then of course, we're just confirming that it's a go to schedule a time for her to be able to talk with you. One of the things that you do prior to this point is setting up a 1-800 number. And that's really easy to set up. There are lots of websites you can go to. We give websites to our adoptive families in their welcome binder. So you just set it up to ring on a phone you already have. It's usually around $10 or $15 a month. So it rings on your cell phone you already have. You just put that 1-800 number on file, so that way when that day comes that we have that birth mom ready to talk with you, she's like one step away from securing that match with you. We
Mhm.
call you, share everything about her, and then schedule that time for her to talk with you. And Libby, maybe you can share a little bit about what sometimes goes through a birth mom's mind. You know, not every birth mom calls exactly when she said, or, you know, maybe you could pick up where I just left off.
That's true, although I think more and more I've seen a shift when I remember a few years ago even to all the way back when I started with Lifetime. um,
Mm-hmm.
People kept a little bit of a different schedule, especially regarding their willingness to talk on the phone. And I mean, Kim and I are from the same era. We probably both grew up with mothers who said that if you call after 8 or certainly after 9, that's rude or too late, you know. But in
Mm-hmm.
this day and age, you know, I was really thinking about it the other day, how we all have cell phones. Many people are getting away from a landline, so it's almost like the phone etiquette of having to ask for a certain person when they answer has sort of gone away, because if someone calls my cell phone versus my husband's cell phone, they know they're typically trying to reach one or the other. It's not like they have to say, you know, hi, is so and so there? So I was thinking how this really has allowed us to sort of flex our schedules a little bit for when we can talk on the phone, because maybe, you know, Kim, I know your husband, for instance, has worked nights before, so you've tried to keep things quiet at certain hours of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you would probably be open to answering your cell phone because you could be in the living room and it wouldn't ring the whole house. You would just see it.
Mm-hmm.
So where I'm going with this is that I have noticed more and more that it's easier for birth mothers to coordinate a time that works for them to connect with the adoptive parents. Um, and they try and be respectful. You know, they're not usually going to say, well, the only time I can talk is 11:30 at night, you know, um, but given the time zones, I've certainly been noticing that some families are willing to answer the phone at 11:30 at night, just to give her the opportunity to learn about them. Because if that's 8:30 her time, you know, and it works for her. So anyways, a lot of times what's going through a birth mother's head is she is very worried about your approval. Um, and she is just as nervous as you probably feel to talk with her, because essentially you're strangers until you introduce yourselves to each other over the phone. But it's always amazing how that first phone call just sort of smooths it out. Suddenly you realize this is just another woman, this is another person on the other line, and you each have learned a lot about each other before you get to that phone call. So sometimes it almost might feel like you're diving in the middle of a conversation. She might say right away, hey, I noticed on your profile your favorite movie is Elf. You know, we have the holidays coming. I love Elf. So she might say, that just stood out to me so much, and it's almost December, and I cannot wait for that to come on TV, or I'd always get it from Netflix, or I just flat out own it, or wherever she watches that. And so you might find that you're jumping off at sort of this funny little familiar area, and then you're diving into deeper things. Other times she might just admit, you know, I'm really nervous, I'm not even sure what to say. And what Lifetime does is we actually have a book for women who are considering adoption. It's called So I Was Thinking About Adoption. And there's actually a section in there for suggested questions that she can ask the adoptive parents that she begins interviewing for her baby. And Lifetime also provides adoptive parents with their own list of questions to ask a birth mother. So it helps because probably some of them feel very natural, and almost you might even think, why do I need to be reminded to ask this? But when you're in such an important conversation, it's near impossible to remember every single thing you ever wanted to ask. Now, where we like to give tips is because it's good. I don't want to say to let a birth mother lead the conversation, because she might actually be looking to you to sort of steer that, but there may be some topics that would not be as conducive to the match to just flat out ask in a first conversation. For instance, if you know that she may have been smoking cigarettes during her pregnancy, I don't know that within the first, 5 minutes or even an hour of conversation that you want to start drilling her about, well, have you smoked? That's really not good for you. And has the doctor given you anything to help with that? She's calling to talk to you about what your life looks like for her child, but also about what your visions are for adoption. And it will most likely be a friendly conversation, and the two of you will probably hang up and think, wow, that went a lot longer and a lot better than I thought it was going to, and I feel really good about getting to know her further. Um, and she may call us and say, gosh, they were so easy to talk to, so friendly. He was really funny, and she was cute, how she was kind of, trying to jab her husband a little, not to joke so much, but I really liked it. She'll get a sense for who you are. So when it comes to what are the best things to talk about, some of the tips that I hear, and I would fully support, because we see them working. I've heard them from birth mothers. I've also heard them from adoptive parents who have completed adoptions. Try to remember to make it as much about her as you are talking about her baby. I mean, she knows why she's calling you. She knows that she's calling because she's pregnant or she has a child that she's considering adoption for. And it's okay to ask her questions. How have you been feeling? You know, are you able to sleep at night? I know you're getting really close to your due date. Or she most likely will probably feel open answering questions for you about her pregnancy, but it's also okay to talk with her about, her, if she wants to talk about her situation and what led her to your profile, that's great. It's also okay to say, we're really curious um, what stood out about us, not because we want you to just go on and on about, all these positives about us, but just because we're curious your thought process and what you've been going through to get to here. It's okay to talk about that. And then I think usually, especially while you're maintaining a match, so let's say you have a great conversation and you decide to match, it's helpful to remember that the adoption is as much about her as it is the baby. And so it's okay. I always tell people it's okay to be excited. It's okay to, she might ask you, do you have a name picked out for this baby? And you don't have to, just say, well, you know, we do. We have a name that we like. Do you want to know it? And to just be friendly about it. And some of you may end up with a birth mother who just has one phone call and says, that's it. I just want to know that you're going to show up, and I don't need a touchy-feely ongoing connection while I'm pregnant. And that's okay too. And Lifetime helps to walk through those as well. But these days, most birth mothers want to at least check in with you. They understand the benefit of getting to know you, because when she delivers and you show up, it's easier for her in those hard moments to think, wow, I've built a trusting relationship with these people, and I know how much they already care about me, and it's just going to carry on to my baby, and I can trust them to keep their promise to my child, and I can trust them that what we've discussed as we've gotten to know each other is the truth and not just lip service. And it really helps her continue forward with the adoption. So let's see here. There's some follow-up questions that came in. I hope that was helpful. Sometimes I will say, I know we weren't super specific, but because the reason for that is because every birth mother's a little different, and that's one of the benefits that you get when you're working with Lifetime, is that you will talk with the coordinator who's been supporting that birth mother since the very first time she called. So sometimes you get the benefit of, hey, Sarah is really excited about you guys, but she actually responds more to email than to phone calls. So she's willing to talk a couple times or whenever it's needed, but I know that she would prefer to email and have a conversation more ongoing in that way. Or there might be, when you talk with her, she's very quiet at first, but she's I can tell she's always listening because she follows up and texts me with questions later, or she always says thank you at the end. We may have little insights just about her personality or the way she interacts to help you um, continue that communication with her, because sometimes I think that's one of the hardest things is reading somebody that you don't yet know, but you get the benefit of some of those insights. And then the other side of that is that if we know details about her circumstances, that you probably won't have to ask her a ton of questions. For example, you don't you won't have to just go on about tell me about this baby's father and the whole situation with that relationship, because she will have already explained that to her coordinator at Lifetime, and we will have shared that with you before you even spoke. So it's not that that's off limits, it's just more you don't necessarily have to initiate all of those questions. It might just be that you're asking her on a personal level, just more because you're interested in her well-being and how she's handling everything, and not so much the details of how do we get where we are today. Does that make sense, Kim? Do you think that that is helpful? I feel like the answer could be different just depending on the birth mother I'm introducing to the family.
Well, and that's what I liked about what Alan and Rebecca shared the other day on our webinar, which the recording is now up on adoptionteleconference.com. We interviewed an adoptive mom and dad, and they shared a lot of the details about their experience. Some of what Alan mentioned was, how Lifetime coached them and prepared them going into that first contact with birth mom. So just know, like Libby's saying, we're going to customize that support to you and that birth mom in that scenario at that time. You're definitely not going to be on your own. And we also already have lists of questions for you and birth mom. I think just going into it, knowing she could be either planning to take the lead or expecting you to take the lead in the conversation. So just be ready for either way that it could go. Be prepared with those questions or topics or information, volunteer about yourself or questions about herself. From time to time, it might be like a video call.
Yeah, that's true.
It is becoming a little more common, although most of our first calls are usually just over the phone, cell phone. But if you are having a video call, it's cool if you can have like some photos or something, or some mementos, conversation starters. I think that's pretty neat to be able to kind of activate the conversation. But the thing is, just be yourself. If you're funny, like in the example Libby first gave about, making jokes, that's fine. She probably already picked up on your sense of humor from your profile, or maybe the video you might have made anyway, and maybe that was part of what that lightheartedness she liked about you. If you're not funny, don't try and be funny.
Right.
Just carry on the same personality you shared in your profile. Remember, she's already interested in you anyway.
Well, and here's a great follow-up question. This is sort of the other side. What if a birth mother starts asking personal questions about the specific town we live in, what church we attend, my employer's name? I will just say it's been my experience most birth mothers aren't going to get that specific with you. Now, they might want to know where you live, just more because it helps visualize where her child's going to go. So here's an example. Kim and I both share in common that because we work with people from all over the U.S. in all different time zones in every single state, when we're talking with women or with adoptive parents on the phone, we like to look at a map and imagine, okay, they're in Oregon, and okay, they're in this part of the state, and it just sort of helps visualize. It's not even that I'm charting, well, gosh, how far are they from this, or the nearest airport, or how long would it take for me to travel to them. Like, I'm not doing it in stalker mode. And I think birth mothers are going to be the same way, especially if you live in a big state like California. She might say, well, what part of California are you in? And you don't have to clam up. I mean, where Lifetime's office is in a little town called Grass Valley, usually, even to most Californians, we still have to say, oh, we're about an hour east of Sacramento, because it's the vicinity that they're more thinking of, and not so much, how do I mail you something or drive to your office? So chances are that, especially at the stranger stage of getting to know each other, when you're just initiating conversation and getting to know each other, she's not going to ask you those questions. You may actually find that you want to talk about some of those things. I've seen some really cool matches come from birth mothers and adoptive parents who live out of state, but then as they got to know each other and built a trust level, then suddenly it turns into, it's so funny. You're in Florida. I just realized, my aunt has very close friends she goes to see in Florida all the time. What part of Florida are you in? And then you may
Mm-hmm.
tell, and she might say, oh my gosh, I have been there. We used to go there every summer. And you might think, wow, this is such a small world to have this kind of connection. Um, and that you might actually like that she has that information, because it's going to be details that will tell your child's story later too, which is why our paperwork for birth mothers and also for adoptive parents in your profile, it's not just about logistics. We're also asking some of the really just neat descriptive details, like what do you want your child to know about you, or what's your favorite color at this stage in your life, or what are your goals after adoption, because these also enrich your relationship with her. But if she starts getting super personal and you're thinking, whoa, like we haven't even committed to this match yet, or we felt really good about this match, but we don't know why she's asking these things. Like, let's say she says, so what's your annual income? Now for me, I'd probably just find some kind of ballpark to reassure her that we're financially stable. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
Yeah.
it's also okay, because every single adoption is different. So even if you've adopted before, it's okay to say, let's talk to Veronica about that. Let's talk to Diane, our coordinator, about that, or to just sort of field things through the person who's been helping you with the match and find out, is this something we need to worry about? Here's a really great example. I always remember this from one of my first matches. We had a really strong match. A birth mother and actually birth father chose an adoptive couple. They didn't yet have children. They lived one state away, so they were a short plane ride to get to each other. And they actually had time before the baby's birth to talk a lot on the phone. Texting wasn't really happening back then yet, but there was probably a little bit of emailing. And then they actually arranged a visit before the due date, had a great visit. Then when due date came, they came back down um, to the hospital where the birth mother was delivering, and she was just about to give birth, and she says, I need everybody out. And she was having an anxiety moment. She was freaking out, birth mother was. And the nurses said, okay, I need everybody out. I need her to calm down, because we're right there and I don't need anything to boost her blood pressure or stop this delivery. Um, the nurse has a talk with her, comes out and talks to adoptive mom and says, well, she's freaking out because she just said to me, I just realized I'm asking these people to adopt my baby and I don't even know their last name. And the adoptive mom said, well, we didn't think we were supposed to tell her our last name. It's not that we weren't telling her, we just didn't think we were supposed to. So she was sort of operating under something that she'd assumed or that she'd heard. And when she had already had a couple months of getting to know this woman, so it's not like she didn't feel at risk sharing her last name. And let's face it, in this day and age, we have our last name everywhere. People can find out. And so she said, of course I will tell her. And so the nurse went back in, asked the birth mother, can they come in and talk to you? She said, absolutely. They came in, they said, we're here for you. We don't want you to feel like we have a wall up. What do you want to know? And all she needed to know was their last name. She just wanted to know, what's my baby's last name? Who's my baby going to become a family member to, you know? And so
Mm-hmm.
for them, it was, the birth mother, I think, felt like they're holding back, but to them, they were thinking, it just never came up. So there could be something like that. But if there's super, super private stuff, you can always, always run it past your adoption professional. But the chances of that coming up are probably slim. And I will say, if you're doing an adoption search on your own, if you start getting super personal questions from a woman that has not had contact with your attorney or with your adoption professional, and she's asking you all these personal things, I hate to say this, but I would take it as a red flag. So you just want to make sure that you have your bases covered, but that you're also open enough to create a trusting bond, because she's really entrusting you with so much. So I hope that was helpful. And we had a few people say, where was that adoption story you mentioned posted? And that's adoptionteleconference.com. I typed it in there in case some of you are online, you can see that. But adoptionteleconference.com is where we put last week's adoption story, among many other adoption story recordings that are on there that I totally recommend. So let's see here. Okay, Kim, let's talk a little bit. Let's see, I thought there was a question about profiles, but I don't see that right now. So let's talk about this great question here. What is the difference between using an agency like Lifetime or a smaller, more local agency to where we live?
You know, definitely Lifetime is nationwide. So we're able to work with women from all across the country who are considering adoption and looking for a family for their babies. So that definitely broadens the scope, because we can find the right fit regardless of the location, and she can find that right family she feels that trust with and that she knows is the right family for her. And she might really like that you're not right there next to her in the community. So that's definitely a difference in the geography of how we work in our program. Because we are nationwide, we make a huge effort to have good communication and information for our adoptive parents. For example, these webinars, all the information that's on our website, being able to return phone calls and answer emails within 1 to 2 business days, answering phone calls right away when they do come in, and giving 24/7 support to birth moms at any point in their process, as well as 24/7 support to our adoptive parents. So being nationwide and providing that 24/7 support to adoptive parents while they're actively adopting, like traveling to the baby when they're at the hospital and so forth, making these extra efforts helps us feel really close to our families and birth moms, and it really has increased the quality of our services beyond some of those local smaller places that might be a small place that only has 1 or 2 staff, maybe even just 5 or 10 staff. They're a little bit more limited in scope usually when doing their outreach. If they tend to only work with local birth moms, then definitely the birth mom is going to be in the community. And I've heard from adoptive parents that we are actually a lot more accessible because of going above and beyond to make sure we're communicating with our families, versus an agency they had worked with which was really close to them, but they could just never reach anybody. So I would look at it as far as what's your experience. When you're comparing, some of the things I've mentioned that Lifetime does, you might find in a local place. But just really evaluate each organization on their own merit. Look at everything as a whole. Observe the quality of the information you're being provided with, the willingness to help you and support you, as well as are they seeing the type of adoptions that you are seeking. They might help more with foster adoption. If that's what you're looking for, that's a great match. They might not see very many newborns. Well, if you're looking for an older child, well, then that might be fine with you.
Right.
So it's more about whether you're local or farther away and larger, I think.
I wanted to also add to that, Kim, because we've noticed such a change. I mean, really sometimes even year to year, but such a change with the way that birth mothers want to be supported, the way that they want to be educated, and the way that they want to learn about adoptive parents or connect either with their adoption professional or with the adoptive parents they want for their baby. And as much, here's the reality. Adoptive parents are usually older than birth mothers. And I would say usually by at least 10 years and probably more like about 20 years older than birth mothers. It really can vary, but when you think in those terms, it may benefit your adoption to work with a professional that is more in sync with the way a birth mother communicates than the way you are naturally inclined to communicate. Because the way that she's supported will make a world of difference in your adoption. And if you're working with, let's say there's a local agency or a local attorney that's smaller, like I know there's one local to us, they do a lot of our legal work, but they really only do 1 to 2 adoptions on their own organically from birth mothers contacting them and asking to find adoptive parents through them. So, they probably don't work with a ton of adoptive parents because it wouldn't be right knowing that they only get, a handful of prospective birth mothers calling them to initiate a match. Their services are usually more supporting once a match is created. So you want to explore that, but also finding out, does this local agency, are they with it? Or are they kind of operating under older adoption times? Like, one of the things that comes to mind is this. We're finding that more birth mothers these days are not inclined to want to come in between 8 and 5 Monday through Friday, sit down across a desk or on a couch with their adoption coordinator and flip through a photo album of adoptive parent profiles. That's a really outdated method. These birth mothers often have children. Some of them are trying to maintain jobs. So you want to make sure you're working with someone that's working around their schedule and helping them to learn about you round the clock, essentially, and not just expecting them to come in on their terms, but that's really there for these birth mothers on what works on their level. And so I just know that sometimes I think more and more adoption centers are all kind of, coming into the same structure, essentially. They all recognize this shift. But one of the things I would look at, for instance, Lifetime's office is from a small town. I know that there are a lot of people in town who cannot wrap their minds around the whole idea of interacting with someone online, or having a text or phone connection with someone that's just as meaningful and accessible as being able to walk through a brick and mortar door. But these birth mothers, they're not looking for that these days. They're looking for what's quick, what's accessible for me, what are my friends doing? And so you want to make sure that whoever you're working with kind of is tapped into that, so that you're not missing the women who are looking for you, is kind of where I'm going.
And I would point out, too, the emotions behind that, the feelings of shame or embarrassment that many women still feel even asking for assistance in planning an adoption, which is why probably a lot of our first contacts between adoptive parents and birth parents are over the phone, not usually in person or in a video chat, because they still have some feelings of shame or embarrassment, even though you're here to help them. You're here to be a mom and dad to their baby. You're blessed that they're reaching out. Even though it's a positive thing that we're hearing from them and able to help them, they still may have some of those feelings which would prevent them from going into a physical building and sitting there in someone's office. That, like Libby said, it's accessible and we're there in the moment. So I think just, this comes down to more evaluating who's going to be the best fit to meet your needs, more so than the location.
That's a good one. Here's a good question. What's the average length of match time between when the match happens and the baby's birth? Or when the adoption takes place? Because sometimes we get calls after a baby's born or with an older baby or a toddler even. So, talking about pregnancies, Gosh, it can really vary. I would still say the average is you're probably going to be matched 6 to 12 weeks before the baby's here. But then you hear adoption stories like Alan and Rebecca shared last week, and they got a call, and 2 weeks later their baby was born. So they only had 2 weeks.
Or when we get a call on a Sunday and the family is there by Monday with their baby in their arms.
Right.
And didn't know of her on Saturday.
Right. But one of the things I think helps to keep in mind is that even though you haven't heard of her, I am seeing more and more women who are calling and researching adoption, but then they're taking their time to decide what they want to do and to choose the adoptive parents. And so, for instance, we might be working or familiar with a woman considering adoption for weeks or months, but to you, it's last minute because she waited until a certain time to take the next step with you. And I don't always think that's bad. I think it's really good that women know that they can take their time and make a plan that works for them, because then they're less likely to go into something with haste. They're less likely to see you at the hospital and flip out and think, oh my gosh, how did I even get here? Instead, they're going to think, no, I took my time to think about this, and this is who I want here, and we're moving things forward. But if a child's already born, that can vary. Sometimes she still wants to take weeks or a couple of months to get the adoption going, maybe coordinate a visit before the adoption takes place. But a lot of women who already have a child that's born want the adoption to take place ASAP, so it may even feel like a last-minute adoption in itself. But again, that's why you're one of the major, I hate to use the word value, but I mean, I think it's so valuable to lifetime families and to birth mothers, is that you don't have to have all the answers today. It's good to talk about this because I love the idea of thinking about all the possible hypothetical ways your adoption can happen, because then you're prepared. But when that moment comes and that specific birth mother is involved, that's when you really see how much Lifetime's been doing behind the scenes, because then they are walking you through step by step. You might say, oh my gosh, I thought about this happening last minute, but I feel like everything just left my brain and I don't even know what to do right now. And we say, that's okay. Here's a couple things to do right now, and then I'll call you back in 30 minutes with the next step. We'll walk you through. So you don't have to feel like it's all something you need to write down right now and carry this play-by-play card with you every moment of every possible way your adoption could unfold. That's why you should be working with someone that you trust to be there for you in those crucial moments with your adoption unfolding. So these are good questions. Let's see if I missed any. Kim, are there any that have been popping out to you? I've been trying to keep up here, but...
I like this question. Is it proper or improper to want to see baby or childhood pictures of the birth mom, or birth mother or birth father?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's such a sweet question.
Mm-hmm.
I would say getting pictures from birth parents is pretty rare, so that'd be very precious if you were able to have that. What do you think, Libby? What are your thoughts about?
I was actually going to say, I feel like you might at least get a text photo. I mean, even women
I don't think there's anything improper about wanting to know what they look like as
I will say
a child.
this. If you are thinking more along the lines of, can we see photos before we accept a match with her, I would say that's probably not that sensitive. You cannot accept a match with a birth mother based on seeing her photo. These women feel insecure enough, and I've heard it all. We have heard everything from, gosh.
And it all ain't pretty.
Yeah, gosh, it looks like she and her other kids have really big noses, and we're not sure that'll fit in with our family photo. Or, I was really hoping for a blonde, blue-eyed birth mother, and she's olive complected with brown eyes and auburn hair. You can't you can't get that specific. You have to remember, really, you're called to adoption not because you're looking for some genetic clone. You're called because you want to be a parent, and adoption's not for everyone. And I think that walking through those questions is healthy, but it's also good to ask yourself why. Why would I need a photo? And if you're like me or many of the other adoptive parents that I've spoken with, and it's more because it's a keepsake and part of your child's history,
Mhm.
that's a precious reason to want a photo, and most birth mothers will want to do that for you. And she may even ask you, I mean, there could even be photos you're texting to her. I remember one last minute adoption. She called. She did not have any profiles of adoptive parents yet. And she ended up speaking. We sort of walked through a profile and described this family to her. And she said, yeah, I would really like to get to know them. And so the adoptive mom said, I'll start talking with her right now. Does she want me to call the hospital? And so she did. Well, while she was talking to that birth mother, they exchanged cell phone numbers and started texting. The birth mother texted her a photo of the baby. And then the adoptive mom said, well, I know you don't have our profile, so here's some photos of me and my family, and started sending these photos to her, like, here's who we are. So it became very familiar very quickly. But I know we've had a couple webinars recently where some of those, I love the specifics of asking about childhood photos. Um,
Mhm.
we've had a few
Yeah,
adoptive
that's what
parents that talked
really.
about how after the adoption happened was really more the time when a birth mom or birth family started sharing some of those older childhood photos, and it really became a priceless treasure. Actually, I think it was Kevin and Jess shared on their
Mhm.
webinar, was it a couple months ago, how their daughter is 2 now, I believe, and it was really only recently that their daughter's birth mother sent a photo of herself at that age, at about 2, and that their daughter just lit up, and she said, Mommy, that that little girl looks like me. And she just started connecting the dots of, oh yeah, we've talked about adoption, and that's who I look like, and you're my mommy and daddy, but I look a lot like this tummy mommy. And connecting all of these pieces together, it was that when the adopted mom Jess, when she shares her experience with that, it's just beautiful because it brought her to tears to know how much that meant even to her toddler daughter. Um,
Mhm.
but if your birth mother doesn't have a lot of childhood photos or doesn't have access to them, maybe she has a really bad relationship with her family and she doesn't even want to bother asking her mom for any of those photos, don't sweat it. You give it time too. So I hope that was helpful. I don't think it's improper to ask if it's more out of curiosity, like creating a history and a treasure for your child, but try not to ask her in a way that would make her feel like it's a conditional request on the adoption or something.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something like for down the road. There have been adoptive parents that they get on the phone with Lifetime from the beginning and state that they need to see the birth mom in person and know what she looks like before they agree to that match. And they find it completely shocking that they would agree to a match with somebody sight unseen. And when you really think about it, I mean, I can see their point. But on
Hmm.
the other hand, most families don't even, like, I mean, that's not even part of the process
Well, that
for
right
them. They're
there,
just more concerned. Yeah.
that would make it worthwhile to, because I'm so visual. I'd love to know.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know how many of you would identify with this, but when you are talking with, say, a new friend, or when a close relative moves and you're talking to them on the phone, you almost feel better when you've actually been in their house, because then you can picture, oh yeah, your couch is on that long wall across from the
Mhm.
windows, your TV's in the corner, your bedroom's like down the hall in the back of the room, and you can kind of picture where they are in their house. That's how I am. It just sort of clicks it all for me. But when I haven't seen that, I get my mind goes everywhere. So
I tend to make something up, a
yeah,
visual.
yeah.
Like even when I'm talking with adoptive parents on the phone, I visualize. my brain just creates a home for them in my own mind. A lot of times I stare at their photo that we have on file as we talk, so that way I feel like I'm really talking to them. But
Which
that
is
also brings me
all the more reason for a video chat and getting together in person. So if there's
if you can,
if there's time before that baby is due, schedule a meeting, because here's the other side too. If you know that she's sort of in a hard situation, especially if if you've been able to help her with any of her needs, like maybe you know that she was having a hard time making rent work, or maybe she's been having a hard time getting to the doctor, and it's hard for you to wrap your mind around why is it so difficult for you to get the doctor, because in your life you have people that would help you. You have a functioning car, you have money for gas. It can really help put things into perspective if you actually go and meet her where she's at. Not necessarily go to her home unless she invites you, but to actually meet her in person and think, oh, wow, I remember working with this one family, and the birth mother was hiding her pregnancy, but to see a photo of this girl, I have no idea how she was hiding her pregnancy. I mean, she was a small girl with a big old baby bump, and the adoptive parents, their heart just went out to her because, they didn't want to say, honey, I don't know how anybody does not think you're pregnant, but they were respecting her privacy, but it helped them so much to see what she was going through and to actually be in her situation in person. So if you ever have that opportunity, I always encourage that. We all do. But don't stress out if you don't get that opportunity. It's just all elements that sort of enrich your relationship.
And, from a birth mom's point of view, who she sees in your profile is who she's visualizing you as. So make sure that everything is up to date in your profile with, like, how your hair is, your physical appearance. Just make sure that when you show up at the hospital, you're who she was expecting, because that's who she was looking at when she was talking with you and visualizing her baby with you. That might seem a little bit off the topic, but I think we definitely have parameters in place for our profile development that help you avoid some of the pitfalls. And that's one of the things. It's just really keeping your profile very relevant and up to date. Marty likes to give examples of, if your profile was done in the summer and now it's winter, you might want to update a photo to be more seasonal so that she doesn't her baby like frolicking on the beach when she's living in 2 feet of snow right now. She might think like, oh, my baby's going to freeze to death with this family that's not wearing a winter coat. So, just talk with your profile coordinator and make sure that you're following all of our advice. Everything that we give as advice is for a reason. As you can see from our conversation we've had so far this evening, we stay up to date. We constantly modify what we're doing to stay relevant and stay with the times so that you can have the best opportunity to connect with a birth mom that's the right fit for your adoption. So definitely, I think sometimes when we're developing a profile, it's such a personal thing that we think that what we really have our heart set on as far as certain photos or certain topics to include, that's really the best way to go. But I would advise just taking all the advice from your profile coordinator, even though sometimes it might not be what your heart wants to put in, but your profile coordinator knows what birth moms are connecting with, and so you definitely want to modify your profile to fit what will work and what matches up with our parameters here at Lifetime.
We had someone say, did you just say to wear the outfit that you have on in your profile to the hospital? And no, you don't.
No,
you don't have to. You don't have to do that. No, don't worry about that.
That's really going above and beyond.
Yeah, no, don't stress about that. Don't stress about that.
So, and then they're also prepared for a drop in the lap because they just wear the same thing every day.
Oh my, yeah.
Same jeans and white shirt every day. So if you need to hop on a plane, you show up looking how you looked in your profile. That's funny.
Let's see. So you were let's see. I saw this. It's a little bit long, so I was trying to catch up. I read a question from a home study that said, how much research have you put into adopting? And it kind of scared me because I thought, how much is enough? How will I know when I know everything I need to
Yeah.
know? Um, I have worked with adopted parents, especially recently. More and more home study providers are starting to say, well, if your adoption professional offers educational classes or these webinars, then some of those will qualify towards your hours that you need for your research that you've put in, your education. But that's really up to the home study provider. So we don't profess to say exactly what that might be. You have to remember that your home study is as much about screening and qualifying you to adopt as in approving you, saying, they're not a dangerous person, they don't have a criminal record, they're not active child abusers, they're living legally within their means, and they don't have a warrant out, or just all the worst case scenarios you could imagine. They're screening you to make sure you are who you say you are and that you're a safe, healthy place for a child to grow up. But the other side of the home study is it's really about preparing you not only for adopting a child, but also just for equipping you for parenthood, but especially for the unique aspects of raising a child through adoption. So try not to panic if they say, how much research have you put into adopting? I would just ask them, well, I've been doing a lot of research. What do you mean by that? How many hours do I need to have documented or recorded or whatever the word they're looking for is to qualify me for my home study? Because that may be more where they're headed, is finding out, for instance, a lot of adoptive parents start out with foster care home studies, um, and then they want to move to a private adoption. And so usually you have to update that home study and make sure that it qualifies you for a private interstate adoption, and that often requires taking some more classes or adding some education credits to your home study um, report, I don't, for lack of a better word. Um, and so you just need to ask them, well, what do I need? What do I need to complete my home study? And then if the social worker is more asking along the lines of personally, how do you keep yourself fresh and engaged? Because I will share that when you're waiting to adopt, one of the greatest tips to help you through that wait is to continue to educate yourself, which is a big reason why Lifetime continues to offer webinars throughout an adoptive family's wait while they're waiting to be chosen for a match, because there's always more to soak in, more to learn, more hypothetical questions will come up. You might have a conversation with a new mom at the park and think, I never even thought that situation could come up. For instance, um, there are correctable special needs that most of us wouldn't even think about. Because maybe you've never known someone with a baby that needs to have a nostril unsealed or something like that. Sometimes there's little things that wouldn't prevent you from adopting that child, but someone might spark a curiosity in you and you think, I've never even thought about that. I need to learn more about that. All the way to some of the very serious things like, am I open to drug exposure, and how much, and what does that look like for a child? But also, if you're thinking about adopting a child of a race different than your own, then there may be some questions and some things you want to research to help prepare you for those unique aspects. So I would go back to your home study provider and just ask them what they meant by that, because their goal is to help you adopt. It's not to make you feel inadequate.
I think too, there are definitely great book recommendations for adoption. At least reading one or two books about adoption could be helpful so that you have something under your belt, especially when someone asks you a question like that. Definitely these webinars, I think, are helpful to enlighten you on a variety of topics and different steps in the process. So you might just Also, share a little bit about what you know about and what you're comfortable with, such as open adoption. We know that it's not giving the birth mom legal rights, it's just having communication, and we want that. We think that's going to be a really healthy thing so that we're able to answer our child's questions as they grow up, of course, at an age-appropriate level. So it might not be as much about what you've accomplished as where your mind is with some of the concepts that they're concerned about. And how that would impact the child as to whether or not you're informed about certain things. You can also comment, well, I've read up on positive adoption language, because that's going to definitely be helpful to prevent confusing your child as you talk to them about adoption through the years.
I thank you, Crystal, for that question. It was really great because it sparked a lot of other people saying, okay, that's good to know. When it comes to the home study, I would say that's probably one of the most anxiety-ridden topics that adoptive parents will have to jump over, and it's not something to freak out about. It's not something to panic about or feel insecure about, but really most adoptive parents will probably tell you that maybe they wish it didn't take as much time to complete as it did, and that it certainly was a lot of effort and work on the front end to get all of the papers filled out, the information submitted. But in hindsight, I've heard most adoptive parents usually appreciate it, and they will usually tell other adoptive parents not to sweat it. So your home study provider, I mean, if there's any reason that the home study provider you're currently working with makes you feel as if you have to somehow be this extra stellar person and qualify your very existence on this earth before they grant you approval to adopt, then I would probably call a different home study worker, because most of them are really excited to support you, to help you, to move you forward toward your adoption goal. So
Yes.
it doesn't have to be a process that you're just gnawing at your cheek and not sleeping at night and dreading. It can really be something that you look back and think, wow, there were some things I really learned about myself, even because some of it is even your own biography and your own family's history, and even thinking forward about, yeah, what do I think about disciplining a toddler or a school age child, or what are my plans once my maternity leave is over, or when my child is school aged, am I going to do private, public, homeschool? Like a lot of people who have babies don't always think that far ahead, and you get the benefit of people actually asking you these questions now before you bring a child home. You're sort of ahead of the game. So good. And Kim, I know you've been answering a lot of questions by typing too, so that's been great to see. Great. I know we've just plowed through this hour, so I don't want to hold people on too much longer. I do want to encourage all of you to watch your email or go to adoptionteleconference.com and sign up. Make sure you're signed up for tomorrow's webinar, and then we have another webinar coming up in a few weeks that's all about traveling and adoption. We're going to offer travel tips. We're going to talk about what's worked for other adoptive parents. And I know that that's a huge topic of interest, especially if you're thinking about adopting a child, certainly out of your area, but definitely usually out of state. So I hope all of you will look forward to that. And if you have questions that we couldn't get to tonight, please reach out to us. We are happy to provide resources, to answer questions. You can email adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. That is a great email to use if you don't already have a coordinator, but if you're already working with someone at Lifetime, just remember that she's there for you and she would love to answer questions for you one-on-one. So you can always shoot her an email or ask her when a good time to talk about some of your questions might be, and work that out, because education really is key. Lifetime's founder Marty Caldwell will always say that education is necessary and key to a smooth and safe adoption, and you want to have a positive experience. And I think the more informed you are, the more ready you are to see all sides of that adoption and have an open, compassionate heart, but that you also still have a guarded heart that wants the best interest for all involved with the adoption. So we really do welcome your questions. And if you need to reach us by phone, you can call 1-800-923-6784. And of course, our main website is lifetimeadoption.com. So Kim, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up tonight?
No, I think we've covered it. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you on your next webinar with us, and we look forward to continuing to answer your questions.
Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone, and we hope to see you again tomorrow night. Have a good evening.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.